This is TWiT.
Well, let's talk about your book. It came out April 25th. You can get it at bookstores or online, anywhere where books are sold. I wanted to start by asking you to read one of my favorite passages. It takes place near the beginning of the book. One of the main characters, who is a tech journalist, is a reporter, is attending a dinner of a startup founder, and she goes into this description of founders in general. So if you could read it, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Katya knew Andrew as well as she knew most of the successful 20-something founders in the startup scene, which was to say, both not very well and rather intimately all at once. She didn't really know Andrew Shepard person, but she knew him just like she knew practically all of these guys. They were runners and foodies and cyclists. They all wore fitness trackers and competed with one another about who had run the most miles or slept the optimal 7.5 hours. They donated money to charities started by their friends that taught underprivileged kids how to code, but voted against raising taxes to make those kids' schools better. They participated in hackathons and marathons. They climbed mountains. They loved South by Southwest. They thought everyone, including themselves, were where they were entirely because of hard work and innate creativity. And if you weren't successful, that was because you hadn't tried hard enough. They didn't understand people who weren't just like them.
I think that is such an amazing passage. It really gets at so many of the things, the problems in Silicon Valley, the problems of the tech industry. I keep wanting to say Silicon Valley, but this takes place in Silicon Alley. I want to start with that idea that they didn't believe that they believed that if you weren't successful, it means you weren't trying hard enough. This idea of meritocracy that was this myth. It's I think it's been debunked a bit, but can you talk a little bit about how that is or hopefully was pervasive in the tech scene?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that there is a degree of myopia in the sense that people who associate with people who are just like them, there's a little bit of confirmation bias happening. You see people around you who it seems like they have done it on their own, quote unquote, but these are people who, went to all the right schools. They happen to be white. They happen to be male. They've been associating with the same types of people for their entire lives. They have a degree of entitlement that if you come from that world, I think it's hard to understand people who don't have that degree of entitlement and who don't think that they are entitled to get the funding or even be in the room to get the funding. So I think there's a lack of empathy, and I think there's a real lack of understanding. And when you've convinced yourself that you've done it on your own, kind of conveniently forgetting, oh, well, maybe your parents paid your rent when you were just starting out, or you don't have student loans because your parents paid your way through college, or, all these things that I think people just take for granted or don't count. Those actually do make a big difference. If you are a person of color or a woman or someone who doesn't have those advantages, those financial advantages, or the network, if you don't have that network, you're really at a disadvantage, and you can't just chalk it up to working hard or being lucky. It's just not the same.